The recent Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case was one of the most talked about court cases in pop culture history. It drew controversy and attention from the masses because of the notoriety of the individuals involved and the unique role that gender played in this case. But before you can understand the different factors at play in this case, it's important to know the events that led up to it.
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard met on the set of The Rum Diary in 2009 and began dating in 2012. The relationship remained quiet as Depp went through his divorce, not making their first public appearance together until 2014. They got married within a year after that. After legal troubles and reports of alleged abuse, though, Amber Heard filed for divorce on May 23, 2016, reaching a divorce settlement of $7 million. Amber Heard filed a temporary restraining order against Depp, which would later be tossed out a day before their divorce settlement. For 2 years, it seemed as though the two had gone their separate ways as they continued their acting careers, and Heard would go on to have a short-lived fling with Elon Musk in 2017, for example. On December 18, 2018, Amber Heard released an op-ed on the Washington Post titled, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change." This op-ed alleged that as a result of her divorce, Amber Heard faced backlash and a hit to her career as her partner was a, quote, powerful man. While never naming him by name or any specific instances of abuse, it was largely believed that the op-ed was written about Heard's experience as the wife of Johnny Depp. In March of 2019, Johnny Depp and his legal team filed a $50 million lawsuit against Amber Heard, arguing that the claims made in the op-ed were, quote, categorically false and that Amber Heard had been, quote, faking her claims of her injuries. Depp believes that in the wake of Heard's op-ed, he was dropped from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, and that the op-ed served as a way to advance Heard's own career with the release of Aquaman, a movie that she played a significant role in, being released 3 days later. Before this case's ruling in 2022, Depp had lost a libel case, which is defamation in writing in simple terms, in November 2020 against News Group newspapers, in which an article from The Sun had called Depp a, quote, wife-beater. Testimony from Amber Heard on her alleged abuse was crucial to the outcome of the case, as the judge presiding on that case sided with Heard's allegations of abuse. On April 11, 2022, the defamation case finally went to trial, in which Heard filed a $100 million countersuit to Depp's $50 million lawsuit, in which she called Depp's lawsuit a, quote, massive smear campaign. The trial got international coverage, dominating headlines for the next 6 weeks in which the trial took place. After a 6-week trial, the jury only required a couple days to come to the final verdict, rewarding $15 million to Johnny Depp after finding Amber Heard guilty of defamation on 3 counts, while Amber Heard was rewarded $2 million in reparatory damages. After the case, Depp said he felt, quote, at peace, while Heard said she felt, quote, disappointed.
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard were featured in numerous online articles about the recent defamation case filed by Depp against Heard. We chose to use pictures from one news source, Fox News, to depict the clear difference between the way that Depp and Heard were depicted, specifically in images. In one article titled, "Will Amber Heard Go to Jail?" there is an image of her crying, one where she appears to be exclaiming angrily, and finally, one image with 3 parts depicting her different crying faces. Juxtaposing this, we have an article titled, "Defense Presents Shocking Evidence Against Depp," which has an image of him smiling softly, even while the article is written about evidence against him as a potential abuser. Next, there were several articles that depicted both actors. In the first article, Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard juror speaks out for the first time. Depp is pictured making a surprised but non-threatening face, and Heard is grimacing angrily. Finally, there is the Johnny Depp trial jury could smell Amber Heard's lies article, where Depp is pictured smiling and waving to the crowd, and Heard standing depressed in the courtroom. It's important to emphasize here that Depp was the victim in this case. However, the depiction of Heard by media outlets such as Fox News relate to the idea of the hysterical woman, or the stereotype that women are more dramatic than men, and this is a dangerous stereotype to perpetuate.
There tends to be a stigma against speaking out when someone is domestically abused. This stigma tends to be even worse for men, as many people believe that only women can be victims of domestic violence. However, men can be victims of domestic violence, and the Johnny Depp vs. Amber Heard trial was an example of a man being a victim of domestic violence. In this trial, There was ample evidence that Amber Heard physically abused Johnny Depp, yet many still did not believe that Amber Heard abused him due to the stigma against believing men when they speak out on domestic violence. An article from the Mankind Initiative states that 1 in 3 victims of domestic abuse are male, and that half of male victims fail to tell anyone they are a victim of domestic abuse and are 2.5 times less likely to tell anyone than female victims. Even though a significant portion of those who suffer domestic violence are men, there is still a stigma that men are supposed to be bigger and stronger and therefore not be able to be domestically abused. This leads to men to believe that they are weak and unmanly if they are domestically abused, making them feel ashamed if they are domestically abused. This causes men to be less likely to speak out, and since very few men speak out, very few are believed. Johnny Depp speaking out against Amber Heard and showing his vulnerability by admitting to being abused helps break this stigma. Johnny Depp showed that he is no less of a man despite being a victim of domestic violence, which will hopefully lead other male victims to know they are no less manly for being victims of domestic violence and speak up when abused.
This trial was televised, which means that the public was introduced into the case and everyday people were able to give an opinion on what the verdict should be. Furthermore, the fame and fan bases of the people involved meant that this case drew a lot of attention. There was a great deal of media coverage on this case, as reports spanned across popular news sources such as CBS, Fox News, The Guardian, and much more. The case also drew a lot of attention because of the celebrities that testified. For instance, model Kate Moss testified in defense of Depp. This drew a lot of attention because of Moss and Depp's famed past relationship and the rumors that had circulated for years that Depp had abused Moss. On the stand, Moss refuted those rumors. However, people were still extremely intrigued to hear the resolution of these claims, and thus more people began paying attention to the case. In fact, the case drew so much attention that it was turned into a movie. According to an online article from the New York Post written by Caroline Thayer, Hot Take, The Depp/Heard Trial, is a new dramatized flick from streaming service Tubi, which stars Megan Davis as Heard and Mark Hapka as Depp. Other ways the trial was sensationalized was through the rumors and hopes of a relationship between Johnny Depp and one of his lawyers, Camille Vasquez. Another online article from the New York Post describes a reunion between Vasquez and Depp, and author Andrew Court uses words like glamorous and brunette beauty to describe Vasquez. A quote from this article reads, "Fans of Depp and Vasquez, including Joe Rogan, had been hoping the actor and the lawyer would start dating given the flirty display they put on during the defamation trial." This article's emphasis on the relationship between Depp and Vasquez, and especially its inclusion of a celebrity example, proves that the media and fans created this narrative despite the fact that Vasquez was representing Depp as someone who potentially abused another person. Narratives like these, inclusion of celebrity testimonies, media portrayals, and movie adaptations sensationalized this case. The effect that this sensationalization had on the public view of domestic violence is debated. Some experts worry that the sensationalization of this case will discourage victims from coming forward because they saw how everyone has an opinion and the ability to express it online, and they fear public scrutiny if they come out and say anything. Others view this case as a positive turning point for male domestic violence survivors specifically because they saw the way that the public responded in support of Depp and how Depp was ultimately able to win this case. In truth, it's hard to determine exactly what the long-term effects this case will have on the view of domestic violence, as the verdict only came out on June 1st, 2022. It may encourage or discourage people from coming forward, depending on how the case impacted victims.
In conclusion, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case was a pop culture controversy because of the way the media portrayed Depp compared to the way Heard was portrayed, the fact that a man spoke up about domestic violence versus a woman, and the effect this trial had on how domestic violence is viewed in society. This case drew attention from around the world and caused a lot of new and important conversations that can lead to more progress in the future.